So they're all organized, these platforms, to increase the time anybody spends on the screen because that brings in the money. And this is a method of addicting people.
Gabriele Kuby, so wonderful to talk to you again. We spoke in the first part of our interview about your wonderful book, which I really would recommend people get, the Global Sexual Revolution: Destruction of Freedom in the Name of Freedom, something which I know you're working on an update to, but which really is brilliant in the way it analyses the background to the global sexual revolution, the individuals involved, the large international organizations involved, the effect it has on everything around us, etc., etc. And it does that in a very brilliant way. I really recommend people go and read that. But a more recent book is the consequences, if you like, of that book, and it's called The Abandoned Generation. And really, you go through and you look at the components of the global sexual revolution and the effect they've had on an entire generation, and maybe even more than a generation now, depending on how you measure these things. Would you say that's a good way of deciphering between the two books?
Yes, absolutely. The second book, the first book shows the predators, what went on that this could overtake our Christian society. This is what really
Mm.
happened. Christianity is
Mm.
thrown out of the window. Who are the victims of the destruction of personality, the destruction of what it is to be a woman, the destruction of what it is to be a man? We don't know anymore what we are as women or what we are as men. That's the destruction of families or the disintegration. I mean, they're not all totally distracted, but it's the disintegration, and it's everything becomes unsure. We don't know anymore what is good and what is bad, and we say the only good arbiter of what is good and bad is our personal freedom. That is too much for us. We're unable to do that. We need instruction, we need orientation, we need input, and this is what Christianity did.
Your book deals with some very, very practical things which are much easier to grab hold of. I mean, you start off talking about a woman's deepest identity,
Yes,
which again has been lost from our cultural discussion, that this ability to bring forth the next version of mankind.
indeed.
And you go from that to how we almost abandon that. But tell us a little bit about that woman's deepest identity.
Feminism destroyed our joy and identity of, as a woman, being chosen to give life to a human being. And feminism destroyed that source of pride, in a good sense, of identity. Yes, this is what I am as a woman, and this is my essence, and this is what I want to live. This does not mean that I will not be educated. Of course not. This does not mean that I will not work, but it does mean them before us. Children come first. Children have to come first for men also. We have an order and hierarchy. If we think there is God, first God, then our responsibility to our marriage partner, and then our responsibility to our children, and then our responsibility to sustain our family, and then our engagement in the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned, in fact, Katie Faust, who has a book and an organisation, Them Before Us, who I've interviewed, I think, a couple of times now, and she's very wonderful. But you then you kind of trace through how the state is almost undermining motherhood, really, and the idea you refer to daycare, state-sponsored daycare as socialism 2.0, which I hadn't thought about it like that before, but it kind of is, really, isn't it? And you talk about the sham of the freedom of choice, because actually you can have €1,000 of state's money to pay for your child to go to be looked after, but if you want to look after them yourselves at home, you get nothing. So there's no choice there, if you like, at all.
The president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, was the family minister in Germany in 2010. I don't know the exact years. She pushed daycare on the country with all the might and power she had. She did something very intelligent for her purposes. She made a law that every woman has has a right to have daycare facilities in her place of living. She has a legal right to demand daycare for her children. So, what does a local community do? They must build a daycare facility. In order to finance it, they must get many women to put their children into it so it can be financed because the money will come from the state. So, these are these clever moves, legal moves of the people in power. At the time, 2010, there was a huge discussion on that, and I was in TV shows quite often, national TV shows, as the one Catholic in the discussion. And as soon as my book appeared, The Global Sexual Revolution, I was never invited again by any. They didn't want to give me any prominence.
Yep.
I was in these TV shows, and I could not make the statement without being laughed at, overruled, booed out that children, small children, need their mothers. And what is happening now? Mothers have been under the propaganda that children need education. Bildung is the German word. So give them into daycare. We can do it better than you. It is not true. Children need bonding. They do not need early education. They need bonding. This is the one thing which they absolutely need. So all these mothers give their children into daycare. The United Nations say start at 6 months, put them away, put them into daycare, preferably all day. So these children, mothers go to work because the economy wanted the female workforce, have women work. So children are under total stress. Their stress hormone cortisol is not lowered anymore. They have constant high stress level. They are not happy when they come back. They will be on the nerves of their parents. The mother comes from work. She will be exhausted from her work. It's no fun then, family life. And they will say, yes, I give my child away. What happens is the child will grow up without, we have the German word Urvertrauen, basic trust, that you have experienced, that you are safe in the womb and you're safe during the first 3 years, which was so important in the caring. You are surrounded by tender, loving care. It gives you a foundation of safety, of trust in life. That is destroyed. And that is very serious because these people, we haven't even come to the iPhone and so on, yeah? And these young people will be manipulable. They will absolutely depend on their peers. They will depend on their social media and all that, yeah, because they have no stability and deep feeling of security.
Your chapters on that, I think the book is it's a positive book because you end very positively, and we'll get to that and what we can do about these things. But just reading through some of those first 6 or 7 or 8 chapters is hard because you tell it like it is, quite frankly. And the consequences of not having that attachment. And you describe those consequences clinically. And you see the state of our schools, our junior schools. I get to speak to thousands of our supporters, and many of them are teachers. and they talk to me about the mess that's the breakdown of family is causing in society, and how that's just rolling forward. And daycare isn't part of the solution, it's part of the problem. um, but then parents say, well, I can't afford a mortgage if we don't work, so we both have to go out. I mean, let's jump into what do we do about that before we go on to the next one.
What comes first? Them before us.
Yeah.
So I think you have to make decisions. You have to make the decision, I will carry out my marriage. I will be faithful to my marriage partner. I will put my children first. And if this means not going on vacation, if this means having a small flat, whatever it is, what the Beatles sing, all you need is love. So if love is at the center, there will be a blessing, and and you will have healthy children. How happy does it make you if you have healthy children? How extremely unhappy are you as parents if your children are disturbed? Yeah, it's the main cause of depression and sadness in when we come to the end of our life, or grow older, let's say. What will matter? What will matter if we have children who are on drugs, who are complete losers, who are psychiatric cases? How will we feel? Will we feel we have lived our life in the right way? So I think we have to, I can't give strategic political suggestions, but I do say we as individuals can make choices to live the right way.
I mean, you do say things like we should recognise the contribution that mothers who decide to stay at home make. Why? So if they're not costing the state X amount of money in childcare, well, why shouldn't they be able to have that, or a grandparent who looks after a child or something? Why shouldn't they be able to have that? It's coming out of the taxes they've paid. So why should it be any different for them if they decide they want to? Because again, I think you would know the biblical verse that talks about the proverb, train a child up in the way they should go, and when they're older they will not depart from it. And that kind of covers a multitude of things. So if you just abandon them to be raised by their peers, or by state employees at a ratio of 10 to 1, who really are fed up with their job and want to go and be somewhere else doing something else or whatever, well, you'll reap the consequences. And similarly, what the book goes on to talk about, in more detail, comprehensive sexuality education and porn and stuff. And similarly, if you're raising kids who are brought up by social media, who are brought up in all sorts of environments, well, what are you going to get?
I think the basic thing is to listen, what is my vocation? And if I'm a young father and a mother, as I experience now with my children, and my children move into the school system and there is comprehensive sexual education, they must organize resistance. And I always say the fathers have to stand up in their power and say, this is not going to happen to my child. And if you continue, you will be in trouble. This is missing. And some countries are, by the way, doing this. I think South Korea has a law of limiting the use of smartphones. No smartphones in schools at all. Yeah? The smartphones, I mean, they are the biggest uncontrollable danger in the hands of well-meaning and good parents, which is extremely, extremely difficult to control.
Put your phone down when you're parenting. I mean, you give lots of examples in the book, of how important it is for parents to actually engage 100%, and not be partly looking at their telephone.
You see, mothers, there's the idea children must see the world and not their mothers, which is wrong because children need bonding, and then they will by themselves look at the world from a secure place. So you see all these mothers pushing the pram, the child looks out, doesn't see the mother, and the mother is on her phone. So it takes away it takes away the caring love which a child needs like water and air.
You talk about digital temperance, which I think is a lovely phrase. And again, something which is we're beginning to debate, or we were before the recent election, beginning to debate this thing about, well, children under 16, maybe they shouldn't have access to social media, and they shouldn't have access to phones that give them all sorts of facilities that they're not mature enough to handle. You talk about cyberbullying and the sorts of things, the idea that a child, it used to be you could come home and home was a safe place, but it's not anymore because of that thing in your pocket. It's no longer a safe place because the bully follows you, and all sorts of things like that. Tell us a little bit more about that and how parenting in that is so important.
Well, when I brought up my children, there was no phone.
Mm,
It was invented in 2007, the smartphone, and it gallops away the social media.
mm.
I don't know, the last 5, 10, 8, 10 years. Every year it goes faster and faster, and a new platform, and now we have TikTok and. So they're all organized, these platforms, to increase the time anybody spends on the screen because that brings in the money. And this is a method of addicting people. And of course, I'm not talking about pornography. We cannot protect our children from pornography anymore, which is a disaster if their first information about sex is through a pornography. And all the young parents, my own children included, they're still so young that you can restrict it, but how do you deal with that? And basically, you have to create an environment of parents who are aware of the problem and who come together and say, we create a social space where children do not feel alone and outsiders, where we push these things to the side and children have a natural, creative life of work and play and learning and doing music and sports and so on and so on.
We have to construct this environment for our children ourselves, and restore the family values. You mentioned, interestingly, because no one talks about it these days, violent video games. And you don't say, because again the data is unclear on this, that it causes violence, but it has all sorts of other definite implications for children, and the kind of things they do in video games, they've become so graphic and so visceral, and the rewards for not just killing people but doing so in a particularly violent way, the sexualized contents.
There is a book out by a German teacher, and she speaks about her experience in school. She has investigated what the pupils, the students do on the social media. It is just so terrible. Like I don't want to repeat it. It's brutalizing. The soul is wounded, traumatized by what they send to each other and what they can see.
Mm, mm.
We have no control as parents. You know, we may have our child may grow up in a healthy environment, but then it goes to schools and they show them, look here, look here, look here. Yeah. And so how we can tame this dragon, we have to create social environments of like-minded people. And that is not easy because parents are also in this whole frame of mind and think all this is fine and they're on the social media and they don't have the criteria anymore. Many have the criteria what a healthy life is.
Yeah. Well, that's because that's another point you make. Let me find the quote. You say, apps make life so simple we forget how to live simply. And I thought, well, that's actually quite true. You know, that we would rather do something on an app or online than just sit with our kids and play a game of whatever it may be, Scrabble. You talk about parents' rights, Gabrielle, and how they're diminishing and how we need to not let that happen.
Exactly.
And you mentioned men earlier on, and where are the men? And so many women I know working in this space and speaking and writing in this space. And you're absolutely right. Where on earth are the men standing up and saying, no, as for my house, we will do something different. We're not going to be absorbed by this kind of nonsense.
Men have to just find their identity again, as women to do too. But men are very dependent on women. Uh, and if women say you are no good and all your manliness is violent and you are rapist, basically, and this is what men have heard for a few decades now, for 50 years, so to speak, since Simone de Beauvoir wrote her book, yeah? And they have become weak and they don't dare to really go into their male power. And we need that male power. We need men who are strong, who protect their families, who to stand up and are ready to fight. This is not a soft game anymore. This is a battle. And I believe that men are created for battle and women are created for giving life.
And you talk about porn and the effects of porn and porn addiction, and we don't need to go into that, but I would encourage people, if you don't know, go and read Gabrielle's chapters in this book, because, well, it's what it's doing to our society, what it's doing to married men, what it's doing to men in the church, what it's doing to young boys and young girls. You deal with divorce and you deal with the divorce culture, and that we've kind of moved away from the idea that, well, no, I've made a promise for better or for worse. And I get there are always examples. If someone's being violent, if someone's, gone ahead and had an adulterous affair, there are always examples where I'm sure you can justify divorce, but this isn't what I'm talking about. And you talk about the devastating impact on the children, not just in childhood, but later in adult life. And this isn't your opinion again, Gabrielle. This is, you've looked at data and stats and you cite interviews and people you've spoken to.
Well, I speak from experience. I'm a child of divorce. It was a shadow over my life from when the conflicts began. The divorce of my parents, the marriage of my father again, had a severe impact on my own life. I had no example what a good marriage is, and I had no instruction what it is. So I come from a divorced parents, and I'm divorced myself. I know what it is like. I know how it burdens your life. I know how it burdened the life of my children. There is still the possibility to, even if you're a child of divorce, it is not obligatory that your life fails, but you have a burden on your life. That burden is not just in the moment when divorce happens, which for the grown-ups, the adults may be like this, now I'm free, now I have a new partner, now a new life begins, which is very often a fantasy. I think more often than not, it is a complete fantasy. But for the children, it goes on and on and on and on. It is never ending story. So I have experienced that. As we separated in 96, I live alone since that time, and I do not find it easy.
It's good that you're so honest about that, and that you've learned through difficult experience that it's just not the ideal way.
I think therapy can be valuable, and if we are in a marriage, this is what our marriage is for, to help each other to grow. And it can be hard and it can be tough and it can to a point where we feel we are unable to do it. This is the moment of surrender. This is the moment of saying, earnestly surrendering to God and asking for healing.
And putting your needs second. Again, I think that's just the root of the bigger problem here, isn't it? The whole idea of going right back to the beginning, that we're trying to pretend that humans are defined by their basest sexual desire and nothing else matters. No, no. Actually, your relevance, your existence, and dare I say, your life happiness is based in what you do and how you help others, not yourself. And that's where the true joy comes from. And again, you talk in the book about how we, where we go from here. And again, it's back down to individuals. It's back down to parents. It's back down to the churches, and everybody actually saying, well, yeah, we need to take on the responsibility, the burden of responsibility ourselves, not wait for the government, not wait for organizations. It's, we're the people we've been waiting for, as I've said before.